slaveship, trusting, and perspective. I would love to end the year, and we just started this some time ago, to end the year by actually going back to the scriptures. In a lot of my classes, we've been on topics, topical studies, like apologetics. We've used a lot of scriptures throughout the year, presented a lot of scriptures, and our profs have presented a lot of scriptures too, I trust you. But just to spend these couple of days now going back to the text of the Bible and seeing what God might have for us. I've chosen these because they stand out to me as really significant concepts, and we're going to have some fun doing this. Now, I want you to participate. When I've done this kind of thing before, we do it in the form of teaching. I just make presentations. I want you to participate a little bit more than that. So, you have your Bibles with you this morning. It is a little chilly outside, although it's warming up quickly. But you can stay in here, you can go outside, you can go back to your room, you can go on the porch, you can go over there in the swings. And I want you to take the worksheet that I handed out, the applied text. You'll have one? Okay, another set here for the next thing we're going to do. Let's leave these tests and do those at lunch. You take the worksheet, and I want you to go through using the skills and that you've more fine-tuned than you came to us with in the fall, skills that you have to go through the text, and ask yourself this set of questions. What is the main theme of the text? Are there any sub-themes, new insights, something I've never noticed before that's similar to new insights, but something that really stood out for you, application for Christians in general, if you were going to teach this, preach it, share it with somebody else, personal application to you personally, how you think you can put this into application. The first set of texts are two chapters, Exodus chapter 3 and Exodus chapter 4. And this is the calling of Moses, the lawgiver. There's some fascinating things in the account that stand out, and I think you're going to enjoy it. You may have been over this before. Some of these, we may have mentioned some of these truths during the year. I'd like to learn number 6 on wisdom. We covered a few of those things down below. Then there are going to be other things that we're going to cover today that maybe we didn't have a chance to point out to you before. Okay? So, let's take some time. I think you're going to need to read through the chapters and make some assessment. You're going to need at least 10 to 15 minutes. I'll give you time to do that. And I'll call you back in and we'll go over it together. And I'll go through exegetically, verse by verse, and see what we have. And you can jump in and join me in putting together some neat ideas. Okay? All right. Yes, question?
So we're going through all of these right now?
Only one.
Only one.
Only Exodus chapter 3 and chapter 4. Okay? Only one. Then we'll come back and go over it. We may be able to do 2 today. Okay? We have 6, so that'd be 2 a day, but we can start early, 9 o'clock tomorrow to finish up with 3. Those of you who are on live stream, it's going to be 10, 15 minutes till we do some it's not group. It's not group. It's easy to do 2 or 3 together. This is your time. This is your time to interpret the text and to handle the text. Okay? So I want to see what you can do. And what we're going to do is collect these, and that'll be what we grade on by the end of the week. Yes?
We're doing Exodus 3 through 4, and then you said if we do another one, would we get a new sheet
Yes.
so we can fill this up?
Yes. That's,
Okay.
you just put at the top your name and put it what it's for. See it says text? See where it says text on the sheet? Put Exodus 3 and 4 like that. Okay? Open book, use your Bible, use your computer. If you need to look up something, the library here. And come on back. I'll give you at least 12 minutes. Okay? Should be enough.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, they're working right now on access 3 and 4.
Okay.
sure where Sam and Zach went. And,
Zach's,
I was upstairs. Do you think you heard me?
yeah. Yeah, that's just getting a little bit to get down.
Without falling.
Yeah. There he is.
That's sort of, you can be alone up there. Take one of the rocking chairs out and sit up there.
Oh no, that's where I was. He was up higher.
Oh, he was up higher, on the roof.
Yeah.
On the roof.
Yes.
How did he get on the roof?
There's 2 trees back here, or there's, all the benches are
Okay.
stacked up, so there's a multitude of ways to get up there.
Show clay.
You can't reach any of the
Glad you didn't
ledges up
fall off the roof.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's begin. Didn't give you enough time, obviously, did we? There's a lot of material in those 2 passages. And the text moves pretty quickly, doesn't it? Chapter 2 is the birth of Moses up until he is fleeing Egypt. So a lot happens in just that chapter. Before we begin on these 3 verses, on these 2 chapters, chapter 3 and 4, is there any background that you think might help us as we develop these 2 chapters? Any background, any context in the life of Moses?
Well, I mean, like Moses is kind of the, like, perfect, you know, emissary to the Egyptians and stuff like that on behalf of Israel, because he is an Israelite that grew up in the Egyptian household, and, you know, here he is making excuses to God, you know, so, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself.
That's okay. No, I want to see context, so
But,
be happy to see the context.
Like in,
So what, you got a good point. Make
yeah,
your point.
because I mean, like, he grew up in the Egyptian household with Egyptian royalty, okay, and so, you know, like, obviously high-ranking Egyptian officers, Pharaoh would know him, and pretty much everybody in Pharaoh's court would be familiar with Moses and who he is and what he is, okay, and, like, and now he's making excuses to God, who's talking to him from a bush, and, yeah.
Okay. All right, so Ben's point is that he was raised in elegance, he was raised with training. He was no doubt given the best education that you could give someone. He was Pharaoh apparent, okay? And all that that meant. So take a bunny trail off of that. He had it made, didn't he? He had it made. And if he really cared about his people, the Israelites, what assumption you might make? I want you to look for bunny trails. I want you to look for insinuations. I want you to look for significance. He was raised in Pharaoh's court. He was how old when he fled?
40.
Pardon?
40.
That's significant. That's significant. So he flees at 40 after he kills an Egyptian slave master, right? Taskmaster. Okay, and then he gets caught at that. He thinks nobody saw it. And then the Israelites saw it, obviously. He didn't think they would rat on him because he was taking their side. But they were watching out for their own skin. They knew it would become harder on them if it got out, that they even knew about it. And they have to admit a Jew did it, an Israeli did it. And then it would be even harder on them. What else do you see significant here in the pre-context? Just from your own knowledge, you didn't study chapter 2, I know that.
Clearly, just the slavery of Israel under Egypt would be important, because if you didn't know that, you wouldn't understand why Moses had to go back to free God's people.
Okay. Did it start poorly and get worse, or did it start good and get worse?
Good.
Their slavery. It started good with Joseph, right? And Joseph accepted, the Pharaoh knew it that day, accepted Joseph, made him second in command, and invited all 70 of the family members of Jacob back to Israel. So everything, and they were settled in the land of Goshen, which was some of the most fertile land in Egypt, on the delta of the Nile, before you get to the Mediterranean. So all that's context. They are honored, they have a special position in Egypt. but then things go downhill. How long are they there? 400 years. And that's an answer to what? What does that follow? Prophecy. Prophecy. Okay? So they're there for a long time, and now they're in trouble, and they're slaves. He had it made. What could you say? If he really, really wanted to help his people, what could he have done? From a human perspective.
Started a riot.
Oh, better than that. He was Pharaoh, the parent. He was the next in line to become Pharaoh. What could he have done for his people? Anything he wanted. Pharaohs were seen as gods. Now think about this. That would have been a human way of looking at it. Wasn't God's plan. Why not? I mean, you've got to ask yourself these questions. I want you to ask questions. Okay, this is fantastic stuff here. If I was a human, and I am, and if I was Moses, it would have been extremely tempting, about 99% tempting, to just let the thing play out, become Pharaoh, and then I could have freed my people, made them special again. Why maybe wasn't that God's plan? What I'm doing, I'm contrasting to I'm contrasting in our culture today, even in the church today. We fight constantly this idea of doing things like the world does to be a success. See, I'm talking about philosophy now. This is deep, this is neat stuff. I get excited about God's Word because it deals with us in our own lives. I mean, in our world today, Madison Avenue techniques, marketing, etc. Wow! Look at God's. Couldn't he have assumed that it was God's will? God put him in Pharaoh's court for this purpose? Couldn't you have assumed that? And he had to do nothing until he became Pharaoh.
I guess like he was already there for 40 years and he was like raised around like all the different like gods and stuff, and like maybe that could have ended up being a temptation for him if he had stayed longer. I don't know.
Take a next step.
Well, it seems like the Israelites need to learn to depend on God, because then they would have been depending on a man for their freedom instead of God.
Go one more step. One more step. You're right up. What?
I was going to say it gives more of an avenue for God to display his glory to all of them and show that you can be dependent on me and you can trust me and your plans.
Those are all true. Those are all true. You're paralleling my thoughts. That's wonderful.
They would have seen Moses as God.
Just one tiny baby step more. The Jews were saved out of famine from their viewpoint, by Egypt. Egypt saved them.
They need to learn to depend.
And if Moses went into Pharaoh's court and was trained, and he would have been seen in line with the Egyptian way of thinking, and if he would take power and bring them back to popularity, they would have easily thought that their success and their protection came from the world. God didn't want that. So God's going to make them leave the place of plenty and go to the place of want, to show that there's more that God can give than stuff. That's incredible. Otherwise, he would have been in the world and of the world at the same time. You with me? Just a neat thought. And there's bunches of thoughts all through the Scripture. If we ever did a second year here, and I toyed with you the other day, and I'm still toying with it, it may be too late for most of you, one of the classes I would hold, we would start with Genesis 1 and go with Pastor Don through the entire text of the whole Bible, verse by verse. I've done it before. It takes a while just to go through the Old Testament, verse by verse. And the capital S, stuff that's there. It's amazing. It's almost like an ingenious God wrote it. All right, any other background? We know he's 40 years old when he flees. When he kills the slave taskmaster, isn't he taking the side of the Israelis? right? But killing the slave master shows he's on the side of Israel, on the side of God's people, but it does something just the opposite. It shows that he is not ready for leadership. Not ready for leadership. So God is going to force him into the wilderness, and he flees for his life. Now, the Pharaoh has to die because he's a wanted man. So that's going to play into the story too. Okay? All right, here we go. Verse 1, chapter 3. Now Moses was pasturing the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, and then you go back and say, well, how did that happen? Well, he comes to this spring, right? And Jethro's got these daughters, and they're, wow, this is a strong he-man, and he protects them from these guys that are trying to force them off the water. And they go and tell their father. He says, invite him home, and they invite him back. And Jethro becomes his father-in-law because he takes one of his daughters and marries her. And he is the priest of Midian. What question comes? I'll just keep going. You put your hand up so you see something you want to put in. Don't be shy. He's the priest of Midian.
Like,
What's-
he's gaining that reliance on God, and like, that's like his center again, like,
Okay. Good thought. Jethro is the priest of Midian. Do we have any data on the priest of Midian? Is he a pagan priest? He seems to lean that he's open to God, isn't he? Later on. But just because he's a priest doesn't mean he's God's priest. Or is it simply because in those days, patriarchally, the head of the family was the priest of the family, and he was known in that area? But it's just a big question mark for me. What does that mean? Who was this Jethro? And he led the flock, Moses led the flock to the west side of the wilderness. So he marched from the east to the west, and he led his flock. And immediately comes to mind, where is Midian? I showed you that video. This is one reason I question it being in the southwest corner of the Sinai Peninsula. That place, if you'd have to have 1,000 acres for one sheep. I mean, the blades of grass are that thin. Now, maybe it wasn't then like it is now, so you have to keep that in mind. Climate change, because climate is changing. And he went to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Is it called the mountain of God because later it became known as the mountain of God, or was it known as the mountain of God when Moses went there? I'm assuming it's going to become known as the mountain of God, and the text simply points that out to us. What's the mountain of God? In our next study together, we're going to see that Elijah goes there. So it must have some characteristic to the Jewish mind of being a special place of the residence or the appearances of God. The mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of a bush. So who's the angel of the Lord?
Possibly Christ incarnate?
You think it's a normal angel? I don't think so. Why isn't it capitalized? I don't think you're going to find the angel of the Lord capitalized in the Old Testament. It's going to leave us up to our study to find out if it's a Christophany of Christ prior to, but it says the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of a bush. And we're going to know what his name is in just a minute. So I think this is an appearance of Christ. What significance is there? Any significance that it's Christ? Second person of the Trinity. Shows us his holiness, because Christ existed in eternity past. And the bush was burning with fire, and it's an intense fire. It appears to be a very bright fire, yet the bush was not consumed. There was no effect on this, must have been dry in the wilderness, in the desert. Even if it wasn't, the thing is burning, and it would have consumed the bush. And I find interesting insights here. Because what does it say to us in Hebrews? Chapter 12, verse 29. about our God? Seems to be a contradiction in a sense. Anybody want to look that up? Hebrews 12:29.
Is it, he's a consuming fire?
He's a consuming fire. So what's the contrast, Aline?
It consumes or it isn't burning up the bush, so it's,
Why isn't it consuming the bush? If our God is a consuming fire. It's God in the bush, so why isn't it consuming the bush? If he is a consuming fire. And we're going to see this fire. We're going to see this fire on the mountain of God later, because God's promise later in these two passages is that you want to know proof that I'm your God? I'm going to give you proof. You're going to meet me here again at this mountain. Well, that doesn't help me as wanting proof. I want proof now in the present tense or the past tense that you're with me, God. I don't want your promise, I'm being facetious, I don't want God's promise that when I die, we're going to be with him, he's going to show me how he was with me. What does that do for me now? See, we humans want signs, we want wonders, we want proof right now. And we'll come to that verse in a second. Yet the bush was not consumed. So I asked myself, why, if he's a consuming fire, wasn't the bush consumed? Then I have to ask, what does he consume? And what does he not consume? Okay. He wanted Moses perhaps to see that it really was God and supernatural. Otherwise, it could have simply been a normal fire in this case. So he didn't consume the bush on purpose, so that Moses would, and what happens? So Moses said, I must turn aside now and see this marvelous sight. What was the marvelousness about it? Why the bush is not burned up. So he sees this bush burning. Oh, that's interesting. And he sees it over there burning, and he looks back, and he's taking care of his sheep, which implies to me there's got to be grass around. He wouldn't have taken them to that area if he didn't think there was grass there. And he looks back, and the bush is still burning. He's watching his sheep. He looks back again. The bush is still burning. I got to go over there and find what in the world's happening. He's by himself. I don't see any indication that any other slaves are with him. Any slaves of Jethro are with him. He's alone by himself. Okay, which is another significant thing about these two passages. Put your hands up when you see stuff. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush. What's strange about that verse, that phrase? What?
Because God's obviously going out of his way to make himself known. He's not standing out there being normal, but he's doing it in kind of a peculiar way. I don't know if there was some symbolism from the Egyptian culture or something that would reach out personally to Moses.
Could be. If you did some research on that, I bet there could be. Now, watch. The bush is burning. It gets Moses' attention. Finally, he decides to go over and find out why it isn't being consumed. And then the text says, when the Lord saw, when the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him.
From the bush.
From the bush. What's interesting here? Jesse?
That God did not call him until Moses actually turned aside.
What was his turning? Inquisitiveness? Expectation? You almost... Why does... Look, do you really believe there's not a word missing out of here that the Holy Spirit didn't want? In other words, every word in the text is exactly the fact that the Holy Spirit wanted it said. Why does it tell us in the text that when he saw Moses turning, it was like he was waiting for Moses to turn. He was. Do you remember we talked about Pilate and Jesus' conversation with Pilate? That turning towards God is a prerequisite to coming to the truth? Supposing Moses would have turned away. Make an assumption. I can't prove this, but make an assumption. Supposing he would have gone over there. That's pretty strange. I'm getting out of here. God may never have called him. Maybe calling starts with the heart's desire to be open. Maybe a prayer and a calling would be, Lord, what do you want me to do with my life? Don't put your hands up, please. Have you ever prayed that? Have you ever prayed that? Are you afraid to pray that? Is your heart open to praying that? What's that bush? I gotta go see what's in the world is happening here. That, he's been out, how long has he been out here in the wilderness?
40 years.
40 years. How old is he?
80.
Stop for a minute and take a bunny trail. Give me a whole message right now on that idea. It'll shock you. Come on. Well, first of all, apparently God's been training him in the wilderness. What's he been doing for 40 years, Julie? Starting a family and raising sheep. He is so far removed from the kingdom of God, so in what we would think the kingdom of God. He's not with God's people. He's not leading a church. He's doing nothing of significance. But God has him exactly where he wants him. Why didn't God come 20 years after he was there? See, you start asking these questions and all of a sudden, well, why didn't he ask him 20 years before? Because Moses wasn't ready. Or God wasn't ready to do what he wanted to do. And you're going to find in the text that it had actually more to do with where the Israel was than where Moses was. If Moses had known that, maybe he said, come on, God, come on, Israel, come on, you Israelis, I'm going to come. Of course, he didn't know any of that. I just find it fascinating. 80 years old. What do we assume in the church today? What do we assume in the church today? God calls you to something, he does it when you're young. How old was Paul? How old was Moses? How old was Abraham? You know what it tells me? God's not a respecter of age. If I have someone in my congregation say to me, oh, I thought God wanted me to do something when I was young, but I said no, what would my response be? Go do it now. But I can't go to school anymore. Can you still educate yourself? Turn your life over to Christ. Does God need just young people? Does he go after just the elite, the millennials? No, he doesn't. What does that tell you about God? Come on. Have fun with this. What does it tell you about God?
Well, he doesn't really need us.
He doesn't need us. He doesn't need your youth. He doesn't need your strength. He doesn't need your education. He doesn't need your money. He doesn't need my education. He doesn't need my experience of all these years. What is he looking for? What would he be looking for then? This guy's a shepherd. And that's interesting because you know how the Egyptians felt about shepherds. They looked down on shepherds. So God's going to pick an 80-year-old guy who is wanted by the law, who has mishandled an opportunity that God gave to him in the past. Not to become Pharaoh, but just to trust God for what he wanted him to do. And not only on top of that, when he goes back to the people that God's going to take him to lead his people free, the Egyptians, they're going to automatically look down on him as being just subclass. Oh, not many noble are chosen. Not many wise. Not many rich. And I'll tell you, you go into ministry, you're going to run smack into this wall. And you know how you're going to run into it? God, if you'd given me more. If you give me more opportunity, if you give me more money, if you bless us with finances, what we could do for you. And God said, you need to go read Exodus 3 and 4 again. Because it's not your strength. You could take almost every one of these verses and make a devotional, couldn't you? You could. You could. That's exegetical teaching. You take each of the verses, verse by verse, looking at it in context, describing it and expressing it to the congregation, or to your youth group, or to your senior highs in your church where you're gonna go back to work. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, the Lord called to him from the bush. God was, I think, waiting for him to evidence expectation, which is a flip side of faith. For those who come to God must believe that he is, and that he rewards those who diligently seek. That's expectation. And said, Moses, Moses. And he said, yeah, it's me, here I am. There's nobody else there, of course. And he said, do not come near here. So God knew he was going to approach. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place you're standing on is holy ground. I would have thought God would say, keep your shoes on. Don't you dare touch this ground. If it's holy ground, wouldn't God say, keep a barrier between us? Maybe the Lord God is implying something else. This is holy ground. Come on over here. Take your shoes off. This is holy ground. I don't want anything between us. Is it not God's intent to make us holy? Are we not to be holy like our Father in heaven is holy? Now, it was true in those days that slaves generally went barefoot to show submission. So it might have been an act of submission. Oh, wow. It's holy ground. Take your shoes off. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Now, Moses doesn't have the Bible, does he? No. So God has to identify himself what God he is. Isn't that interesting? You would assume that a burning bush, look, in experientialism, in existentialism, okay, you would assume that Moses automatically knew it was God because it was a miracle fire. What does that tell you? When you see a miracle in your life, you better still, come on, 1 John 4, test the spirits, see if it's God. Wouldn't you have assumed it was God? So God says, here's the God talking to you, by definition. So God does it for him. Then Moses said, hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. That opens a whole stream of thought about Moses. Because we know that no one could see God's face and live. Moses debates God on that later. He goes up the mountain and he meets with God. It's implied that he sees God. So how could someone see God and still be alive? There must be some accreditation to Moses of God's own righteousness. There must be some allowance on God's part by God's grace to let Moses see him more than any other man has seen him. We're going to see that in Elijah in about an hour. And he was afraid to look at God. That was a good fear. So he hid his face. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt. I like this play on words. He hides his face because he can't look at God. He wants to see God. And God uses the word see and says back, oh, I see my people too. I see you and I see my people. See the implication? So God can see evil. He can see his people rebelling against him. He can see the faultiness of Moses. He can see man as he really is. We have a trouble seeing God. And I've seen them in Egypt and have given heed to their cry because of their taskmasters, for I am aware of their sufferings. So I have come down. What fret language is that? Anthropomorphic. Did God have to come down to deliver them? No. So what's he saying to Moses? I have made a decision to be personally involved now to deliver them. I've seen their plight, I've heard their cry. You'll find in the last 2 or 3 verses of chapter 2, it says that. God has heard their cry. I've come down to deliver them from the power of the Egyptians and to bring them up from that land to a good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey. And that's the place that he had originally given to who? Abraham. When Abraham was coming out of the Fertile Crescent, he arrives at Mount Bethel and offers a sacrifice there. Later that mountain would be very special, as we see in Jerusalem. And he says, so take the place of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Pezerite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite. God names a whole bunch of cultures. So he's telling Moses, you know what I'm talking about. You know specifically what land I'm talking about. I mean, you were educated in Pharaoh's house. You knew geography. And so that's the land I'm going to give you. And now behold, the cry of the sons of Israel has come to me. Furthermore, I've seen the oppression which the Egyptians are oppressing them. I watch what the Egyptians are doing, and I watch the people cry out in anguish. Now, if you and I interpret this text, we have knowledge of the whole text. We've got a whole Bible to turn to. So what do I know? I know that Egypt was a symbol of what? Egypt as a nation, geographically, was a symbol of, in the scriptures?
Prosperity, wisdom, peace, I don't know, strength.
The world?
The world. Don't we have that in 1 Corinthians chapter 10? That when they came out of Egypt, they were baptized in the Red Sea. What is Egypt a symbol of? Being unsaved, being in the world. And then God leads them and delivers them out of the power of Egypt. Oh! And they turn towards God and trust Him, and so a symbol of that, He has them baptized. There's a New Testament symbolism here. And just for fun, jumping ahead, God's going to take them to heaven, right? How many agree? Going to take them to heaven. Palestine. Heaven. No. Palestine is not a picture of heaven. Going from Egypt, the world, through the Red Sea and being baptized, being born again, following God, and He's going to take them to the land of promise. Palestine is not a symbol of heaven. How do I know that? When they get to Palestine, what are they going to have to do to enter it? Fight. What are they going to do once they get in it? Fight. There's no struggle in heaven. Palestine is not a picture of heaven. God said to Moses, because you sinned against me and did that thing with the rock, remember? You can't go into the promised land. So Moses went to Sheol, Hades, and hell? He's going to go to hell eventually? No. No. So Palestine can't be a picture of heaven. So what's Palestine a picture of, Zach?
Be a picture. I honestly don't know. I'm not sure.
It's going to take them 40 years to learn the lesson of how to get into Palestine. Why do you think they're wandering for 40 years? It was a 2-week trip along the Mediterranean. Why did it take 40 years? Because Palestine is a picture of the rest. Palestine is a picture of Christian victory. Wow. And they couldn't have victory unless they were going to fully trust Him. And what happened to one generation? They turned back. So only the children of that generation could go in. And Moses couldn't lead them. Why couldn't Moses lead them? Well, he sinned. But there's another reason he could be the leader taking him into Palestine. Moses was the one who gave the law. Can the law give us victory? No, it only points out that we're sinners. So Moses, it wouldn't have been fitting for God to allow Moses to lead him into the land of rest. God would have been implying that by following the law you can have victory. So he brings a new guy. You say, Pastor Don, these are bunny trails. Get on the subject. I am on this subject. This is the way I teach. This is wonderful. This is seeing the big picture. Your people will be thrilled when you pastor them or help your husband pastor them or you do Sunday school classes. Because all of a sudden, oh, wow, I didn't know I was in the Bible. So God has to pick another man to take him into the land of Palestine. What's his name? Huh?
Joshua.
Pronounce it in Hebrew. Get some goosebumps. Who alone can take us into victory? Jesus. Yeshua. HaMashiach. Only Christ can take us into victory. Do you understand that this actually happened, but it's a whole copy of a plan that God has? Keep looking with this idea now. The cry of the people that come before me, and now therefore come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh. Wait a minute, you just said, God, you came down to lead him out. Why don't you go lead him out? No, you're my man. I came down to lead him out and deliver him, but I'm sending you to do the work. So Moses should be thinking here in terms of what? This is God's will. If he came down to do this, it's more than just his suggestion. It's a decretive will of God, or he wouldn't have come down to do this. This would have reinforced Moses' view. If God says he's going to do this, can anybody stop him? If God be for us, who can be against us? The first thing out of Moses' mouth should have been what? What can I do to help? He's not going that direction. God's going to have to work with him, because he comes up with the same excuses you and I do. Therefore come now, and I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. And I can hear Moses right now saying, then you really aren't going to do this, God. You didn't come down to deliver your people. It's up to me to do this. God says, you're not paying attention. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? Well, he had a lot of reason maybe for saying this from a human perspective. He was on the run. There may supposed to be some wanted posters, if they made the wanted posters by chiseling them into cuneiform tablets. Some of them may still be hanging on the walls. Who am I that I should go into Pharaoh and that I should bring the sons of Israel out? Now, if he would have asked it this way, God, you know I'm not sufficient. You know I'm on the run. You know I'm not going to be welcome back there. Because I'm a shepherd and because I did what I did before, I'm not going to be accepted by anybody back there. You know all that, Lord. It's totally impossible for me to do what you've asked me to do. If he would have said it as an acknowledgement of his own inability to do whatever God calls you to do, that would have been okay. Had he would have summarized it by saying, but if you want me to do it, I can assume that your calling is your sufficiency. Because your calling is giving me something to do that you want done. If you tell me to do something that you want me to do, come on, what can I assume? God is going to get some goosebumps. God, you just got to live to be 70 and you're going to start saying, oh my goodness, I wish somebody would have shared this with me when I was young. I wish somebody would have shared this with me when I was young. God calls you to do something, what is it? It turns out to be his promise to accomplish what he asks you to do. He'll be sufficient. What most of us do, we get a calling from God, and we go out there and spend most of our life trying to accomplish it in our own strength. Moses is at least admitting the truth. You've got the wrong guy to deliver Egypt, Israelis out of Egypt. And God says, of course I got the wrong guy, but I'm not picking you for your ability. I want something else. What is God after? Come on, give it to me. Is he after talent and power and strength and intelligence and education and all the rest? What is he really after? What does he simply want to hear?
Yes,
Yes, I'll do it. What is that? What is that evidence of? A willing heart. A willing heart. Do you know why I'm doing this passage? I'm not just trying to help understand Moses. I'm talking to you guys. I hope the Spirit of God is talking to you. You know why most people turn God's will down in their life? Because they don't think they can accomplish it. Well, that's okay. That's all right. You're just as serious in trouble if you say, God, I'll do it. I can do this. But that would be self-righteousness. That would be self-works. God can't use that either. He's going to the perfect man. Would you have picked Moses? Well, he was a great man. No, he wasn't a great man. But he turns out to be a willing man, and that's what makes him great. Moses said, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? And he said, God said, certainly I will be with you. I will be with you. What more could God have offered? When God called us to Jackson Hole, oh, we didn't have money. We didn't know hardly anybody. We made so many mistakes. I'm talking about we, but it was me. I led my wife and daughter here because I thought God wanted us here. If God really wanted us here, what could I count on his promise being? He'll be sufficient, but what else? He'll be with us here. Wherever he sent you, you're going to know his presence. And he said, certainly I'll be with you, and this shall be a sign to you that it will be I who have sent you. Now this is the sign. And you say, I want more than this. Let me translate this in my own life. This will be a sign that I'll be with you. It is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you should worship God at this mountain. What is God saying? This is proof that I'm going to be with you. When you stand back at this mountain in the future, then you will know that I was with you. No, come on, no. I want to know every day. I want to see a sign. I want to see a miracle. I want to see your power. I want you to do stuff for me. God says, no. I'll tell you when you're going to get the sign after the whole thing is over. Not quite, but almost. You want to see that I've been with you? You just spent 50 years in Jackson Hole, and then you start seeing some signs that I've been with you. What does that say about signs? Ooh. So they become proof of God being with us? Now, is he going to talk with God in between these two? Of course. But what is God saying? I don't want you to rely on the signs on a daily basis to see if I'm really with you. How many see this? Are you going to believe this and put this into practice? Or are you going to get discouraged and say, I'm done. I'm out of here. I haven't heard from you for a while. Or is he going to believe what God says? Then Moses said to God, behold, I'm going to the sons of Israel. Behold, I am going to the sons of Israel, and I shall say to them, if I go to them, and I say, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, now they may say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? And God says, I'm the God of Isaac, Abraham. No, I know he's going to do that later. But he says first, here's what you say. You say, I'm the present tense verb to be, I am God. If you believe I'm going to be God when you need me, or you believe I am God some distance away, that's not enough. I am God. You tell him, who sent you, Moses, to deliver us? The I am. He's here right now with us. You must believe it too. And God furthermore said to Moses, thus you shall say to the sons of Israel, add then, sons of Israel, God of your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial name to all generations, which means there's something in that I am that is significant for you and me, for all generations, a memorial name for God. I don't have to wonder if he was God and what he let happen yesterday. That's past tense. I don't have to wonder if he's going to be God right now when I'm not sure I can see him anywhere in my desperate need, because he's the I am, present tense, and I know and can count on hope that in the future, whatever I run into, he'll still be God. It's not going to change on me. Go and gather the elders, visitors together, and say to them, the Lord God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I am indeed concerned about you and what has been done to you in Egypt. You go tell him I love him. You go tell him I care for him. You go tell him that I'm going to help him. And what could be the first response of the, come on, you're an Israeli, and you hear this. What's the first response of an Israeli hearing this? Where have you been for a long time? But that would be a statement of belief or unbelief? Unbelief. Okay? Where were you when I needed you in the past? But that would be a critical statement and not accepting the truth that God now says, I've been watching, I've been concerned about you. My mind floats. There's so much. We're going to quit here in about 10, 15 minutes and let's take a break, and we'll do our second one today maybe. But when the nation of Israel is going through the wilderness, they finally get almost there, and they come to Edom. And the king won't let them through the land. Now think about this. These kids have been born, so they aren't all 40 years old, of course. So they haven't been wandering for 40 years. The rest are died off, and now they're all died off. They're the older generation. And they're that within striking distance of a couple days march, and they're home to where God wants them to be. And they're going through Edom, and Edom won't let them through. Who were the Edomites? Pardon?
Esau.
They were cousins, okay? They were part Jewish. And God prophesies that he's going to deal with the Edomites because of their not allowing the Jews, the Israelites, to go through. Do you know how long it takes for that judgment to come? Anybody want to guess? About 100 years. What does that tell? What does the 400 years tell me? What does the 100 years judgment on Edom tells me? God is never in a hurry, but he always keeps his word and his promise. Don't you think look up here, don't you think most of the Edomites were dead by the time God fulfilled his promise of judgment on the nation of Edom? So God is slow about his promises. No. The Bible says he's not slow. What might have been one reason he hesitated to bring judgment immediately? Grace. So they could repent. And then later I read in the Old Testament, the prophet Obadiah. Do you know what the prophecy of Obadiah is? It's real short. You know what the prophecy of Obadiah is? The prophecy on Edom. So I see a young woman, okay, who is, when these armies come against Israel later, and the Edomites won't take them in, Okay? And I think I have my story straight. You tell me if I'm incorrect, because I'm working now from memory. But that's where they get into trouble with God. They get into trouble with God because the Israelites can't flee these foreign powers coming in to take them over. I apologize. I think it's connected also to going to Edom, but you let me know if I'm incorrect on that. May have happened twice. And I'll have to research that. But I know it did happen a second time. It happened that time when they're fleeing Egypt. They're fleeing Palestine, and the Edomites won't accept them. So the evil people coming in take them, make them slaves. You see this I envision a young woman with 2 children, just to make an analogy out of it. Her husband's killed, she's fleeing, they're going to make her a slave, they're going to make her children slaves. Maybe they've already taken her home, burned her house. She's running to Edom, and the Edomites, the cousins, won't take them in. And Obadiah comes along and says, God's going to get you for this. And it's 100 years before the prophecy comes true. So I said, I will bring you out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Pezerite, the Amorite, the Hivite, the Jebusite, to a land flowing with milk and honey. And they will pay heed to what you say. The Jews will listen to you, Moses, and come to the king of Egypt, and you'll say to him, the Lord God of Hebrews has met with us. So now please let us go 3 days' journey into the wilderness so that we may sacrifice the Lord our God. God is only telling the Pharaoh, give him just 3 days to get out of town and go sacrifice. Is that ethical? Is that honest? Yes, God wanted them to have go sacrifice for 3 days in the wilderness. What's God's purpose? He wants to get Pharaoh to let him go. So I ask myself questions about that verse. But I know my God is just. And he never lies. I know that the king of Egypt will not permit you to go. He says that to Moses. He's not going to let you get out, even for the 3 days. I'm going to make it easy for him, and he still won't let you go. So will stretch out my hand, strike Egypt with all the miracles that I shall do in the midst of it, and after that he will let you go. And I will grant this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. I will grant the Israelis favor, and it shall be that when you go, you will not go empty-handed. Remember what happens? They're going to go to their neighbors, and they load them down with gold and silver and clothing. But every woman shall ask of her neighbor, and the woman who lives in her house, articles of silver, articles of gold, clothing, and you will put them on your sons and your daughters. Thus you will plunder the Egyptians. Chapter 4, then Moses answered and said, he's already said to God once, who am I? You got the wrong man. I'm not gifted, I'm not talented, you got the wrong guy. God says, I'll go with you. That should be sufficient. And Moses now a second time with a second excuse says, what if they will not believe me or listen to what I say? For they may say the Lord has not appeared to you. You're giving me a personal testimony, but how can we trust you? And the Lord said to him, okay, what's in your hand? And he said, a staff. Tell me a little bit quick about the staff. A little quick about the staff. Describe the staff to me. Just a stick he picked up along the way?
Like a shepherd.
The shepherd's staff. Make some assumptions that are probably correct.
Has a little crook thing.
May
on
have
the
a
top.
crook, may or not have a crook. Pretty good size staff. Little stick. How old is this thing? Probably's had it for it's got his marks on it. It's got shiny parts where he holds it and has worn it. It is Moses' staff. What is a staff a representative of any shepherd? His ability to take care of the sheep, his authority, his disciplining of the sheep with it, his protection of the sheep with it. You see the picture? Moses, what is in your hand? It's the, look, I'll go faster here. Put your hands up if you see stuff. Just jump right in. It's the only thing he's got. What's in your hand? This is it. How much money you got? How much land do you own? How many followers do you have? Wife and kids? What's in your hand? This is me. This is my symbol. This represents me. Represents me to the sheep. When the shepherds see me, they know me by my staff. This is me. I see it as old. I see it as worn. I see it as very much used. God says, throw it on the ground. So he throws it on the ground. I wonder if he felt naked when he did that. I wonder if he felt unprotected when he did that. What's in your hand? My AK-47. That certainly was his AK-47 to Moses. If it was a snake, or a vicious animal, or if he needed to use it for discipline on his own sheep, his power, his authority, and he threw it on the ground. What happened to it? It becomes a snake. Any ordinary snake? No. How do I know that?
He was scared of it.
He was scared of it. How long has he been in the wilderness?
A long time.
He probably knew which snakes were dangerous and which weren't, right? So he saw this as
Very dangerous.
so when he threw it on the ground, it became a very dangerous snake. And the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand and grab it. Pick it back up. One catch. Pick it up by the tail. Tell me something quick.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't pick up a snake. You never pick up a snake by the tail. Unless you're sure the snake is not dangerous. But if you know it's a dangerous snake,
Yeah.
you're a clown, you're an idiot, you're stupid.
Very much.
You never pick it up. God is going to ask him to do something that is totally... Come on, don't you see what's happening in these texts? He's teaching them, he's training them. Pick it up by the tail. You're kidding. Don't you know what kind of snake that is? Pick it up by the tail. That's absurd. I'm going to get into trouble. I could lose my life listening to you. Ooh. Oh. How much do you trust me, Moses? I said I'd be with you. Look, he was a real man. How would you respond? Sweating bullets? Your palms are wet? There's beads of sweat on your face? Damn. So he stretched out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand. Notice it doesn't say what. It didn't become, it wasn't a normal staff anymore. It didn't become, the Bible doesn't say it became his staff again. So what happened, Jesse? Why did God do this with this staff? Just to give him an evidence, a sign, to prove to his people he now had power to pick up a poisonous snake? Oh, come on, this is a picture. Throw it on the ground. It became a snake. What kind of snake? A very poisonous snake. His own staff was dangerous. To Moses, his own staff was his ability, the old nature's ability. Picking it up shows that God, obeying God, he had power over whatever his staff represented. And he picks it back up and it becomes a staff again. You know what God did? Come and tell me what God did. Julie, what did he do? God took the... Huh?
Took the staff. He took his
God
ability.
took the snake out of his staff. Let that sink in. You want to serve God? What do you got? This is me. This is what I got. Well, let's see what it's worth. Let's throw it on the ground. It's a snake! God takes a snake out of his staff. Who is the snake? The serpent. You pick it back up. I can't pick it back up. It's a dangerous snake. Not when I'm dealing with him. He is not dangerous. And when he picks it back up, it's not just his staff anymore. Whose staff is it now? Whose staff is it, Adrian? Anybody? It's God's staff. It's God's staff. It's not the serpent that's going to do the miracles. When he throws it on the ground, every Egyptian and every Israeli in his right mind knew that that was a dangerous thing. Now, you can't possibly deal with that. Moses says, watch this. He picks it back up with his own hand, and the Israelis say, he's got power over the serpent. Anybody else add?
I have a question. I don't know if it's just my translation, but earlier it doesn't say that it's Moses' staff, it just says a staff, and then later on it says a staff, so what are you getting? That's different. I'm just a little
God's
lost.
going to still use Moses, okay? But we know it as the rod of God. It's the rod of God. Okay. Whenever he uses it, he's going to be representing who? Representing God. Representing human effort? No. Representing God. became a staff in his hand, so that they may believe the Lord, the God of the fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. And the Lord furthermore said to him, now put your hand into your bosom. So he's got this cloak on. So he puts his hand into his bosom, in his shirt, and he says, so he put his hand in his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was full of leprosy, white as snow. Do you think any Egyptian or Israeli would know immediately what that was a symbol of? Why did God say, put your hand into your bosom? Why didn't he say, put it up your leg? Why didn't he say, put it behind your back? We're going to play, you know, rock. Why did God say in your bosom? Pardon? Yeah. Put your hand in there and bring it back out. Show me what your hand is in. Do you think Moses is paying attention to this? My staff I've been carrying around all these years is a deadly snake? And God just showed me that? And now he puts my hand in there and I bring it out and I'm full of leprosy? Ah! Where did that come from? God says, think about it, Moses. That's your heart. So he put his hand in his bosom, he came full of leprosy, and he said, now put your hand in your bosom again. So he put his hand in his bosom again, and he pulled it out of his hand, and behold, it was like his restored flesh. What is God implying to Moses? We all know now what your heart is like, but I can change your heart. Does he have any New Testament to run to? You and I do. Because when we preach and teach, we can take these thoughts to the New Testament to verify them. Can we not? Yes. Do you think Moses understood it? I think so. I think so. Moses, first of all, it's not your power, it's my power. Secondly, you've got to be your heart. Your heart's got to be right. You've got to trust me. Okay? And it shall come about that they shall believe you and heed the witness of the first sign, that they may believe the witness of the last sign. Oh, just in case that doesn't do the job, these two signs they heed, you say that you should take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground. The water which you take from the Nile will become blood on the ground. What is God doing here? So he tells the Israelis, if you don't believe me for these two signs, you go do a sign. You do one. And you go take water from the Nile, which was life to the Egyptians, and you pour it on the ground, and blood is a symbol of death. Symbol of death. Then Moses said to the Lord, third excuse, I've never been eloquent, neither recently nor in time past, but nor since thou hast spoken to thy servant, for I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. Look, God is going to lay on your heart some calling in life. It may be a wonderful calling of being a pastor. It may be the wonderful calling of being an attorney. It may be the wonderful calling of being a store clerk. It may be the wonderful calling of being a wife and a mother. And you're going to offer him excuses. I'm not up to the job. Well, of course you're not, but I am. I'm going to take leadership of my family, but they're not going to follow me. Then live your life out and show them that you're doing it by trusting in my power. Let them see that, exhibit it in your example, and have a clean heart when you're doing it. And if they don't believe that, then tell them, okay, you're going to experience death if you don't follow. What a picture. What a picture this is. And then he finally argues, I'm slow of speech. You know me. I stutter. I stumble. And God says to him, who made man's mouth? God does. Well, if I gave you this job to do, then I can work around your stumbling. I can work around your impediments. I can work around your frailties from a physical viewpoint. Or deaf, or seeing, or blind. Is it not I, the Lord? Who made the blind? I did. Who made the deaf? I did. Who made those who stutter? I made them stutter. I made them of slow of speech. I made them so they can't spell. See, this is a very comforting text to Pastor Bob. That's why it means so much to me. That's why it means so much. Does God use men who have the gift of all those other things? Absolutely. But then you get the idea you could never be used unless you were that person. And that is never true. Never true. You never have an excuse to turn God down, ever. because he's everything in me. Now then go and I will be with your mouth and teach you what to say. But he said, please, Lord, and then he finally admits what the real hard issue is. I don't want to do what you're asking me to do. These are all excuses, I know. Now, here's the truth. Go pick somebody else. It ain't me. And the anger of the Lord burned against Moses, and he said, is there not your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know that he speaks fluently, and moreover, behold, he is coming out to meet you. And later it says in the text that God speaks to Aaron and says, go meet your brother. And when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart, and you are to speak to him and put words in his mouth, and I, even I, will be in your mouth and his mouth. What is verse 14 and 15? You're never going to have, you don't think you have the power to lead anybody and set anybody free? Well, that's true, but I'm going to use you, and I'm going to bring people around you who maybe even go further than you, beyond you. Some of my students who go way beyond me. I pray that that's true. And God will use you. And I'll teach them. You put words in their mouth. You teach them what to say. Moreover, he shall speak to you for your people, and to come about that he shall be as a mouth for you, and you shall be as God to him. And you shall take in your hand this staff with which you shall perform the signs. And Moses departed and returned to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said, what's the response of Moses' heart? I'm leaving on a jet plane. And he's going to answer God's call. Now this is fascinating. The chapter could end there and we'd be just happy at that. But something else is going to happen. Ready? And return to my brother in Egypt and see if they are still alive. So he says to Jethro, I want to go see if anybody's still alive. Is that true? Is he fudging? Is he still hesitant? Is he still situation ethics? He knows Jethro has the authority to let him go or not, even at 80. What is this patriarchal system? So is he saying, I want to go to Egypt and move my family there and live there forever? No. So he says part of the truth. Well, I'm not even sure about that. I don't want to give you you work that out, verse 18. He knows the people are still alive, doesn't he, Selena? Why? Because God said he wants to deliver him. So he's not delivering dead people. He's not going to move 1.5 million caskets to Palestine. So why does he say to see if they're still alive? Maybe it's not another way of saying, if it's in the Hebrew wide language, I want to go see my people again. That would have been legitimate. Translators, they'll say, to see if they're still alive. And he said to Moses, go in peace. Go ahead, you got my blessing. So the Lord said to Moses in Midian. So Midian? Where's Mount Sinai? Isn't that interesting? Go back to Egypt, for all the men who were seeking your life are dead. So the Lord speaks to him again. Now he's on the road to obeying God, so the Lord speaks to him. And says, by the way, Moses, the guys who were trying to get you, you're a little worried about that? What can we assume? Moses was a little worried about that. How do I know? Because God gives him the answer to something he's probably worried about. See, sometimes the Bible will give us an answer to something that isn't in the text. Why did God say, oh, by the way, the guys who are after you are dead? Because Moses is worrying about the guys being after him still. So Moses took his wife and his sons and mounted them on a donkey, and he returned to the land of Egypt. Moses also took the staff of who? God in his hand. And the Lord said to Moses, when you go back to Egypt, see that you perform before Pharaoh all the wonders which I have put in your power, but I will harden his heart so he will not let you go. By the way, you do all the miracles and I'm going to harden his heart. The same sun that melts butter hardens clay. And this man, I'm going to make an illustration out of him. He's going to say no to me, and no, and no, and no, 9 times. Finally, on the 10th time, he's going to say yes, but then only out of the fact that he's absolutely desperate. Not because he believes in me. So what does that tell you about miracles? Getting people to believe in God through miracles. Come on, what does it tell you? Can God use miracles? Did Jesus use miracles to draw credibility himself? Did that make everybody believe in him? The Pharisees knew that he was doing miracles. Did that change their hearts? What does that tell you about signs and wonders and miracles? Don't trust them in your apologetics. Okay? And the church is in that, boy, are we in that pit today in the United States. Signs and wonders movement. I wish they'd read this chapter. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, Thus says the Lord, Israel is my son, my firstborn. So I said to you, let my son go, that he may serve me. But you have refused to let him go. Behold, I will kill your son, your firstborn. Now it came about, verse 24, here we go. We're going to classically end this chapter. Now it came about, put your hands up, you know where we're going with this? It came about that at the lodging place on the way, somewhere out where he pitches a tent on the way to, is he obeying God? Yes or no? Huh? Is he on his way? Yes or no? Taking his family with him? Yes or no? Yeah, he's going. Ready? It came about that he was on the way, that the Lord met him and sought to put him to death. Talk about a catch in the program. Talk about a surprise scene in the play. What could Moses think? I'm doing what you want. So Moses is going to, now watch this. Watch this. This is phenomenal stuff. When I call you to be my minister in the kingdom, no matter what job I give you to do, don't you ever count on that calling as being a covering for anything you're going to do that is wrong. Don't you ever get cocky. Don't you ever get self-assured just because I gave you something to do that now you can be graded on a curve. Oh my goodness, young people. Then Zipporah, his wife, took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and threw it at Moses' feet and said, you are indeed a bridegroom of blood to me. She walks up to him, blood on her hands, throws the foreskin on the ground before Moses. And God let him alone. God withdrew his warning to Moses that he was going to kill her. Why was God going to kill Moses? He was doing what he was going to do. Did God choose Moses to lead the people out of Egypt? Of course he did. Did God give Moses the power to do the signs and wonders to eventually get the Jews to believe? And then eventually the 10th one, Pharaoh would let him go, sort of, and then go after him, so he really didn't believe. Was God going to equip him to do everything God wanted him to do? Yes, but Moses had to learn one more lesson before he got there. Your calling is not a substitute for your own personal walk with me, and you obey me personally. Do you think Jimmy Swaggart should have paid attention to this? You don't know who Jimmy Swaggart is?
No.
Oh my. Oh my. Just 15 years ago or so, he was a very well-known evangelistic preacher in the United States. Could do miracles, it appeared. A lot of money. Preach. You should have heard that guy preach. And then he was caught in a motel room. Who was the other guy that did it? Built a whole empire. Another TV evangelist. What was his name?
The guy from the south, right?
Yeah, it'll come to me. He built a whole
And it
thing,
happened
a
like in the
heritage
past few
city,
years.
and whatever. Pardon?
It was in the past few years, right?
Pardon?
Wasn't it recent, kind of?
Oh yeah, it was recent. I don't know. You guys don't. You're so young. You just miss all these illustrations. Tammy was Baker, Jim Baker. Remember his wife Tammy? Oh my goodness! Now that he was in jail for a while because the government caught him doing bad stuff, and Jim Watt he'd call me and we'd talk on the phone about the mess because he was involved. He asked him to help, so I gave counsel to Jim Watt to give counsel to these people too. God is wonderful letting us be involved. It's sort of special. I had reason just the last trip going to see our editor. You drive right past Jim Baker's new place that he's starting over. There's still people following him. They got a divorce. And if you're called, how many are going to be called? Let me see your hands. Let me see your hands. God's got a will for your life, right? Don't ever use that as security that you don't have to watch closely your own. So God let him alone. At that time she said, you're a bridegroom. Now the Lord said to Aaron, go and meet with Moses. and he met him at the mountain of God, and he kissed him, and Moses told Aaron all the words the Lord had given to him, and all the signs that he had commanded him to do. Then Moses and Aaron went to the assembled all the elders of the sons of Israel. It's possible, in verse 27, 20, 29, Moses at the mountain of God sends his wife and the children back home, because it appears that they meet up later. And Moses said to Aaron, and assembled all the elders of the sons of Israel, and Aaron spoke all the words which the Lord had spoken to Moses. And then he performed the signs in the sight of the people, so the people believed. And when they had heard that the Lord was concerned about the sons of Israel, and that he had seen their affliction, then they bowed low and worshipped. Okay. Just in closing, this is a wonderful book. This is a brand new book. It just came out on April 24th, 26th. It's written by David Green, who is the patriarch of the Green family. Okay, he wrote another book that tells the whole story of how he started Hobby Lobby. Okay, incredible story. This one, I bought it, and I'm not done with it yet. Wow. He talks about God owning everything. And when they went against the government in the lawsuit, they could have lost everything. The initial government edict was, you have to provide health care, Obamacare, for your people, and it included birth control, which is the morning after pill. There's no question that that causes an aborted child. And he and his family met together, he and his sons and their wives and his grandchildren, and they met together at one of the oldest son's home, and they made a decision. We could lose the business, but we're going to sue the federal government. Because it was could have been as much as $1.3 million a day in fines. Wow. They finally got it pushed back to when it would start at a later date that saved them $230 million potential fine. And he knew it would bankrupt the entire company, so he put his entire company on the line for principle. You don't have to read this book. Let me just share this with you and I'll let you go. This is when he was younger. I imagine my parents also worried because I never did well in school. I had to, listen, if you're very intelligent, Lord bless you. I'm so happy for you. Then take the 10 talents that God has given to you, give them back to Him. Whatever He calls you to do them with all your heart. And if you're sitting here this morning and you don't think you're worth snot, then you don't know who your God is. I imagine my parents also worried because I never did well in school. I had to repeat the 7th grade. This guy's worth billions. With a B. 700 stores. 30,000 employees. And he flunked 7th grade. Well, he's a failure. I love it when God does this with people like this. I love it. Because Moses was a failure too. He flunked 1st grade, didn't he? And I barely got out of high school. I sometimes tell people that school was my worst subject. Of course, attending 8 different schools didn't help as that was a pastor. And that denomination moved them every 2 years. I just thought, you can't even get to know your people in 2 years. The problem wasn't that I couldn't think of reason. I did love to read, and I devoured books about famous men, about the challenges and how they achieved success. That's avant-garde education, which I believe in. I drank in tales of heroes like Daniel Boone and Abraham Lincoln, yet I read these books largely on my own. What was happening in the classroom held almost no fascination for me, and this is why I did so poorly. Oh, can I identify with that? That's why I have a totally different philosophy of education. When I read this, it just brought joy to my heart. One of the best things my teachers ever did for me was put me in a program of distributive education. Today this would be called work study. Whatever the name, the idea that I could get school credit for working a part-time job seemed like a miracle to me at the time. This is what landed me at McClellan's, a 5 and dime store in Altus, Oklahoma, that I mentioned earlier. It was at this store that I found my calling. probably wouldn't have said these words in those days. I've been taught that people with callings became preachers and missionaries. There was no category in our theology for people who were called to secular pursuits like business. Now, though, I realize that a man can be called to a business as any preacher has ever been called to the ministry. But back in those days, devotion to business proved I was backsliding. His mother was worried about him. One more quick quote. During this time, a verse from the book of Ecclesiastes was often on my mind. Whatever your hand finds to do it with all your might. From my early days of retail work, I learned to pay attention to that feeling of contentment when my hands found something they love doing. A calling can be the desire of our hearts. A calling can be anything from retail work to landscaping to carpentry to homemaking. You're going to meet, I think maybe before you meet, you're going to meet Nick. He's kind of Rachel's brother. They won't get to meet him. He's on a 5-year college program with the Air Force ROTC with the purpose of becoming a pilot. Sharp guy. He's learned a lot, hasn't he? Turned into a young man. He's been 4 years. If it was a 4-year program, he would be graduating next week. He fell in love with a girl and it didn't work, and he was crushed. Okay? God was in the wilderness with her. And just recently, he was accepted into the Air Force pilot program. That's been his dream. I don't know how long I've known him. Going to be a pilot. 4 years of work in college to become a pilot. And then they gave him another eye test. And he is colorblind in one shade of green. And it's automatic disqualification from being a pilot. He's been in the wilderness, learning how to have victory. I love the guy. I pray that God will give him grace to show that God is sufficient. Fell in love with another girl. This one's first class. Okay, she's going to be here too sometime this summer. She's extremely intelligent and has her degree as an engineer. He's going to be an engineer. He didn't want to be an engineer. He can still be a commercial pilot, but not in the Air Force. Not with Lockheed. They gave him a second test and he failed again. And they've talked. She, after all these years, doesn't even want to be an engineer. You know what I think she wants to be? His wife. And raise children. What a novel thought. It doesn't matter what your calling is. A calling can be anything. We're each wired differently. You can be a homemaker and have something unique and significant to contribute. He goes on to talk about marriage and legacy. Oh, that book, just picking it up, just getting it in, see how it confirms so much of what I've been trying to tell you all year long. Let's pray, and we'll let you go. Please come back, and we'll at least introduce the next one, which we may not get to develop today, okay? What a marvelous book, amen? And written hundreds of years ago, right? And very still applicable for me and you today. You have a calling? You do. You will. Listen. Turn towards the bush. Pay attention with faith. And see what God has for you to do. And then do it with all your heart. Don't let anybody ever look down on you because it's not what they're doing. Don't ever get pride because you're doing something you think is more valuable than somebody else. The honor and privilege is because Jesus said yes and you're saying yes to him. Okay? That's where the honor is. And that's where the reward comes from. Okay? This is sort of a commencement address. We got something else for people to know. Father, thank you for this time together. I many years ago, said to my congregation, Lord Jesus said, I felt like I was Moses. 2 or 3 of the detractors who caused some of the split thought Lord Jesus I was claiming some kind of arrogance or pride. What I really meant was, there are moments when I know who I am. In that moment, Moses wanted to quit. Been there. I just thank you for your grace. If it wasn't for your mercy and grace and your all-power ability, you couldn't have chosen me. You would have needed somebody with all the chutzpah and all the talents that you need, but you need nothing. All you want to hear is, yes, yes. Okay. I'm gonna look like a fool. You're gonna make fun of me. I want to have failures. They're not going to listen. They're going to stammer. Or pick somebody else. Okay. All right, go take a break. I'll come back and I'll introduce the next one.
You want this now?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll turn them in before you leave for lunch. And then after lunch, we'll do our test. And we have 2 more days.
Grading.
Grading.
Oh,
Okay.
Don't pat, don't pat. A lot of ideas.
You sure?
Should put your hand on probably nice that you already saw. I bet you can do it over again, see me? I'm honestly making mine, I'm making a mess, already forget it. How much if I don't even see it? Because it's incredible. Because the God is incredible.
Oh, are we supposed to put our fingers up?
Touch it first.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ah. So you have a call, you know, you think you know what we want you to do? Probably won't wait till you're 80. He gives you hints along the way. All right.
What?
Yep. That is the old people from the aside from God. Because that's how he created us to be. Yeah. It's a little bit confusing. For a lot.
And it's just like, how do I approach this next? Because it is scripted. It's not saying that it's
The first church is behind every bush.
Okay, let's begin. Here's some, you want to hand these out for me?
Sure.
Applied text, these are my worksheets. Okay, everybody needs one of these.
Andy?
Thank you.
I just got these ready.
All right.
Okay, let's pass in our worksheets from the last one.
Is it okay if I was writing on this as you were talking?
Oh, sure, sure.
Anything you guys want me to?
Sure.
Should I collect them all? Collect all of these?
Yeah, you want to collect, here they are, here's the others.
Oh, I just answered
My goodness, who did all the artwork on the paper?
Definitely not.
Raise your hand.
That's mine.
Are you an artist?
Can I take one block?
No?
What?
I like to doodle.
These
I'm not
need two
an
right
artist.
here.
I cannot draw.
Two
I can only doodle.
You can't draw, you certainly
Oh.
can.
Well, like, I can't draw.
A different style of drawing, graphic.
Okay.
It's very nice.
Do you have two more of those worksheets or?
Oh, yes, they're handing them out here.
Did you? No.
That over there's more.
Okay.
It's on you. Thank you. Did you do it?
Mm-hmm.
Did he punch you?
Almost.
Did you tell him to do that?
Mm-hmm.
Huh? I didn't tell me. He did it to me, and I'm like, do it to Jess. See what happens.
Told him to keep it.
No.
You left your oatmeal on the side.
Oh yeah, I finished that. I'm just.
Okay, if you all have a worksheet, on the top of your worksheet, put your name, and the text is 1 Kings 18 and 19. 1 Kings 18 and 19. And whenever I go to the Shepherds Conference in California, my favorite of any sessions are when somebody stands up in the pulpit and just expounds it today. That's my favorite, to listen to another person speak. I just love that. I mean, they see so many insights. And it was interesting that, how do you find your calling? Well, we didn't talk about that. You may find your, some of the help may come to find your calling through your gift, by finding what your spiritual gift is. Some of it may simply be, ask yourself a simple question, what would I like to do? And I don't have time to discuss with you, at least now, maybe we can come back to it before we leave on Wednesday, but probably not. And that is, the Bible says that God gives us the desires of our heart. Well, what's your desire of your heart? Walk in the Spirit, and that's a third step, and that is you walk in the Spirit on a daily basis. If I follow the Lord today, and follow Him tomorrow, and follow Him Wednesday, and follow Him Thursday, then, and I keep doing that, then Saturday I'm going to be where He wants me to be. Isn't that interesting? And He's not going to tell you, I almost can guarantee this, He's not going to tell you the entire plan He has for your life and lay it out for you in a novel, a book, that you can go check it off as you do it. Why? Because He's not after you just doing stuff for Him, He wants you. He wants you to grow with Him and have a relationship with Him on a daily basis. Many years I hired a guy who I thought I knew, and it didn't turn out very well. And I asked him what his, about his calling. I mentioned that, and he looked at me puzzled. What do you mean calling? If you want to go into ministry, you ought to have some sense. Now, how does God do that? We can talk about that. We expect lights to go off in your head or lightning to strike. Don't just look for the spectacular. What does He lay on your heart? How does He open doors for you? And I asked this young man about his calling. He looked at me surprised. That should have been a clue right there. Because a lot of young men look at the calling, going pastor to ministry, missionary, as a vocation. We're going to look at that next. As just simply a job. And if it doesn't work out, you can get another job. When you have a calling, you burn bridges. Moses burned bridges. Couldn't go back to sheep herding again. He burned bridges. And that bridge was burned by faith. When I was a young man, I had a desire. What does God give you the desires of your heart? And He's got so many wonderful surprises. Because you're sure He just wants to suck you dry and make you clean. A big reach in the sky. Sure, I'll give Him my life. Then I'll send it to you, bangies and that. Well, He might, but you'll be the happiest person in the world doing these things. I promise. So I wanted to be a forest ranger. Dreamed about having a camp. Can you believe that? Some kind of a resort, some fun thing that was in my head. And then somebody came and said, I want you to go to school, and he said, I'll pay for your application, and it turned out to be downtown Chicago. Parents dropped me off, but I was going to die. I thought I was going to die. It was the epitome, the opposite, 100% opposite of what I had dreamt about doing. But I said yes. And I didn't know that I liked working with young people. I didn't know that. I didn't know what my gift was at that point. I didn't know. So the Lord had to take me in, do some educating. Still is. So isn't it ironic that He took me in the opposite direction of anywhere I thought I was going to want to go? Just the opposite. Out of the woods. Away from people, away from civilization. Trees and mountains, and I wanted to be, not away from people. I wanted to have a camp or something like that. But I went in that direction, and the Lord, I didn't realize that that was the path to get to where He wanted me to go. And where He wanted me going was, can you believe this? Can you believe this? He shows me that I wanted to be with people and love people and wanted to be in that, because I had that desire, but I didn't know it. And then He sends me to Jackson Hole, of all places. And I don't have to work every day taking care of the trees. I can go watch them and walk past them and enjoy everything that's here. And I don't have to take care of management, and I still can get to do. I get to do two things I really like to do. Isn't that incredible? Go do that. You gotta say yes, and the first yes may take you in a direction like the wilderness. Okay. I'm preaching at you. That's what I'm doing. I'm preaching at you this week. I want you to join me, though. You have these wonderful papers. What insights? I should be obedient to God even if I don't want to do what He wants me to do. And even if I don't obey Him right away, God will be merciful to me and work my heart towards His own will. Wow! That's pretty neat. So put your hands up more and more, okay? Now here's what we're going to do. We're not going to have any more time today. Well, we have 5 more to do, and we have 3 tomorrow and 2 the next day. And so you have the worksheet, and put on the worksheet, you know what it is. What was it? First Kings 18, 19. You might want to read a little bit more in context, but at least those 2 chapters. Elijah, oh, what a man, what a story. What an ending. It doesn't quite go to his ending. You might want to read a little further to catch that, because that's all context. So go outside right now, and don't show up in the dining room until 10 after, no sooner. I want you to spend 15 minutes on those 2 chapters. Question?
Yeah, when is lunch 12:30 today?
Pardon?
Is lunch
I think lunch is at 12:30.
12:30 time?
We got plenty of time.
Okay.
You can go longer. So, and I get goosebumps when you say that, because I'm trying to help you this year learn how to meditate. It's things you never saw before in the text. Okay, Lord bless you, and we'll see you at lunch, and then we'll do our grading. And what a wonderful afternoon. I think that staff's got stuff planned for this afternoon, right? Sunny outside, and the flowers are coming, the trees are blooming. And all the young men's fancies are turning to work. What are they going to do this evening? Okay, 15 minutes.
We got it, don't worry about it.
Minimum 15 minutes.
I was paying attention.
You were paying attention. Very good.
I was, for a split second. I know it's
Did you break it?
No, it's okay, we're good. I got it. Austin and made some tomahawks.
Oh, they're not going to break.
No.
That helps with work. I was present and counted for it.
Here's more worksheets if you run out.
They press it on.
Enough for the next 2 days. What a joy it was that year we did that at our church. We took 2 years to go through the whole Bible together. It just comes alive. God's grace.
So, Pastor, what's the